The worst horror movie I ever saw was fucking great.
Hello and welcome to This May Hurt a Bit. My name is James Strayer and this is
John C. Myers.
And we are a horror franchise podcast discussing each film in popular and not so popular franchises. And today we are doing our wrap-up episode on the Final Destination franchise. We just watched 5 of these suckers, watched 5 Phantasms. We watched 12 Friday the 13th. So this is kind of the point of this show. Where do we fall at the end of these series? So did you like these, John?
Oh, yeah, overall, yeah. There's not much to these, but they're fine.
Yeah.
Getting mad at them seems pointless. I mean, obviously we talk about there's definitely some low points in the series, but you could kind of just sort of keep doing this ad infinitum and it'd be okay.
I think these movies are super fun.
Yeah.
And if anybody just finished listening to our review of part 5, which neither one of us were particularly into that one didn't work so much, but overall the series is great.
Yeah.
And I would watch one of these every 2 years, frankly.
I don't know. 5 was so it wasn't like mean in the way that Friday the 13th remake was like mean and shitty. It was just bleh. Everyone was just kind of crummy. I didn't really enjoy it.
It sucked the fun out of the rest of the franchise, I think, because to me this franchise works best when it's pretty wacky. And I think we talked about that definitely in part 2 when Flophouse guest star Dan McCoy was a part of the show. When we were speaking on, I loved so much when people would like pull up to a gas station and see 4 clumsy ass people just like not having their shit together. It became almost like slapstick gag routine.
Right.
That made me the happiest.
Yeah, which is funny because the way that these movies deal with it, like I think it's incredibly interesting that, as we've discussed, that there's no Jason, there's no figure, that it's just the concept of death. It compartmentalizes that because, like, yes, death and all this shit is scary, but this is only going to happen to you if you have survived a thing where you were supposed to die. So it deals with this concept of death coming for us all, but it compartmentalizes it in this small thing, but it's still terrifying in a way that is going to, like, in your own life, you've been around knives and people, clumsy workmen or something like that. The other day, I was delivering a hard drive to someone or whatever, and I turned the corner to get back to my car, and there was some construction going on, and there was a big, like, cherry picker thing in the air. Like, no one was there, but I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to cross the street.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to walk under it. I've seen too many Final Destination movies.
These movies affect your behavior. Definitely.
Yeah.
Kind of like what you were saying is just death comes for you at no fault of your own, too. Like, these are not, it's not teenagers having sex in the woods. It's not like you being punished for anything. It's somebody else, as I said in the first episode, somebody's saving you from dying before, and the ripple effect going out, and it's just like, well, this is just coming for you and it's inevitable. Right. So you didn't do anything to deserve this necessarily. This is just going to be a wacky happenstance.
Yeah. And that there's no judgment about it, is that it comes for us all, and that it's not something you can stop. The only hope you can have is to prolong it, is to, either have it skip you right now in its ripples, but you're going to die eventually.
Right.
And there is the thing, they've touched like with Eugene and George in 4. It's like, well, I can't kill myself now. Yeah. Because I got to buy this, but then they eventually die. So it will still happen to you, but it is at best you can just dodge it for now. That's really grim, but the movie doesn't like wallow in that.
Right.
It's like, no, but the point is to try to get away from it right now.
Yeah.
And that keeps it kind of exciting.
And that does make me think like, and this is something that we can examine as we keep going with other franchises, but there's no survivors in a Final Destination franchise. Clear managed to make it, 2 movies?
2 movies.
Because death comes for us all no matter what. So you can't have a Laurie Strode. You can't have a Nancy. The point of this is that you're going to go.
Yeah.
So you could say that that's a negative on this particular series if you don't have like a main protagonist that can keep going all the way through.
But I think it kind of works because, I mean, like we talked about the girl in 2 and Hot Cop. Creepy Stary Cop, that they survived. The only thing that happens at the end is that kid blows up.
Right.
Since they don't show up again, and because every other character has died, you have to assume that they got theirs at some point.
And I think sometimes, and I can't remember if I was reading just like an online resource for this or what, but like I feel like in between films, characters are killed off too. And sometimes they just get like
Devon Sawa hit by Rick.
Right.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And each of these when I was looking it up today, each of these do have novelizations, which I find so endearing and dumb and funny. But like, who's reading the novelization of Final Destination Part 3?
There's additional ones too. Like there was like in the mid 2000s, where it's like one was like a model was on a shoot that went wrong or something like that. And I mean, why not? You know? Particularly, I mean, it totally would make sense now if you bring it back to start doing that because people love the YA.
Sure.
Get that going.
Yeah, this is R.L. Stein, Christopher Pike fodder right here.
Someone had brought up, and I forget who, so apologies to that person, about how like so many of these movies in the new push of like teen horror that was happening in the mid to late 90s, when this all started, was so much on that Scream vein of wink, wink, but like people couldn't pull it off the same way. So it was just like it was just a whole new wave of slashers and stuff like that while trying to be cute and funny. And this largely just went, no, we're just going to be like a teen focused horror movie, but it's not, we're going to be serious about it.
Serious.
It's going to be fun, but it's not going to be, we're not going to feel like we're better than what we're doing.
Sure.
And I think that's cool.
And on top of that, I feel like, and it's been a very long time since I've watched some of the other ones that you just mentioned, but I feel like the squishiness and the death scenes in these are way more pronounced.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I've watched the Scream movies a little bit more recently. I don't think I've ever seen a single I Know What You Did Last Summer, but it's still in that style of like hot teens in the late 90s, early aughts type of thing. But I really think that the goopiness of Final Destination is by far and away stronger. Scream is super violent. But these movies have a lot more splatter to them than they needed
but
to have.
They really don't linger on it that much, which I'm always impressed by.
Yeah.
They managed to be very judicious with it in a way that I think is very effective and keeps it fun without becoming the point of it is becoming a gross out thing.
Do you have a favorite of the 5?
I'm going to go with 2. I think was my favorite.
Mine
there's a lot to like in 3, and I like the. After watching all of these, I like the quietness and smallness of 1.
Yeah.
Like there is seeing how big and ridiculous it got. Like that. Wow, this was kind of this little intimate story about just these few people rather than like, bridges falling over and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think the first one still is still one of the best ones with the suspense too. I think it really does that well. Some of them, even 5, which we both didn't like. The scene with the screw on the balance beam, amazing. And I think they're at their best when they do that. Did you have a particular favorite?
Part 2, absolutely by far and away.
Yeah.
3 is a lot of fun. As you were saying that though, I was thinking about the suspense aspects a little bit. There's something different about the suspense in Part 1 versus the suspense in the screw on the balance beam in Part 5. It's winking at the audience, but not in a bad way.
Yeah.
Like, they know what they're doing and they know what they want to give to the audience. Whereas Part 1 was a little bit more a new concept.
Right.
And the suspense felt a little bit different. Part 5 felt more fun. Like you were kind of laughing every second. Whereas Part 1, you were just like, oh my God, what's actually going to happen here? So it was a little bit more serious.
Yeah.
But that makes sense for franchise films because you start laughing the further along you go.
Right. Because they kind of know they get to a point of ridiculousness often.
Yeah.
I'm going to completely butcher this quote, but there's a thing that like Hitchcock said where it's like the difference between like surprise and suspense is like if you want to have surprise, have a couple sitting at a table and a bomb goes off. Suspense is you see the bomb, then they're having the dinner, so you know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I think, in Part 5, you're like, boy, there better be some bombs going off. And so they're going to really play with that.
That's totally true. Because as soon as you see a gymnastics routine, you're just like, what's going to happen that's going to be terrible?
Oh, how are they going to do this one? It's very interesting in how they play with that. And I do think that with differing success, they're able to do that.
Right.
A lot of the deaths in some of the later ones, particularly 3 and 4, have kind of more of a theme to them where 4 is a lot of automotive-based deaths.
Okay.
Because it's the NASCAR thing at the beginning. You have the racist being drugged by stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You have, now this is a little weak link, but the riding lawnmower throwing a rock at somebody, trapped in the car wash. George just gets hit by a car, which I think is kind of an interesting thing as well.
Yeah.
But it's like, I think that's done in a subtle enough fashion that it's like, yeah, it's there, but like, it's not all of the kills, but there's a through line.
I completely see that, and I didn't think about that at all until now. That makes perfect sense. I was going to like undercut everything and just say like, oh, you mean water?
Yeah.
Because that's like, water is the second banana villain in this series.
Yeah.
Completely.
There's so much, particularly like water and electricity. And I feel like it got to the point where it's like, well, it's like it happened in the first like couple movies, and then it became, we're going to tease that it's going to be water on this thing, but it's not, because we know you guys know it's stupid. We know it's stupid, you know, at a certain point. But
must be so fun to write. Like, just I remember reading about the guys in part 3 who would just like walk around the hardware store and just like pick out things that you could die from, and like that's got to be a lot of fun.
I mean, and a lot of it comes from, I was reading something where one of the writers of part 5 was like, well, my wife's having LASIK surgery. What if that went wrong?
Yeah, there you go.
And I had to go. I had an eye appointment this week, and I was thinking about, and young people probably don't have to deal with this, but do you remember like, I think it was like test for glaucoma or something? It was a machine you put your eye up to, and there'd be the poof air, like with a chunk as it did it. Mm-hmm. The most terrifying thing. So I was thinking about that immediately, like, oh my God, I'm going to get Final Destination at the eye doctor.
Exactly. Yep.
And I almost asked my eye doctor about LASIK surgery just to find out, like, if it was right in the movie, if like, do they numb the eye first, and would it hurt if they numbed the eye first?
You know, you could have done some field research and come back to this episode with a little bit more to offer.
Yeah.
All right.
I could have had my insurance actually like cover something useful.
That would have been awesome.
I get my bill, and it's it's all like broken up. Like, here's your eye exam, Final Destination consultation, not covered.
Not covered. No. Cost you $700. And I'm just like, well, guess we got to start a Patreon.
Yeah.
Do
Sorry, everyone. I asked my doctor a question. Can you give us money?
Do you have a favorite inciting incident from the 5?
Oh man, that's a tough call. Because I mean, again, the pileup in 2 is great, but I really enjoyed the roller coaster too. So it's difficult, but definitely like 2 and 3 are neck and neck, but I'm probably going to go 2 again.
Yeah, 2 again for me, because maybe it's just because I don't ride roller coasters very often at all, but like literally every time I see a logging truck on a highway, I think of this movie, and it's just so well done. And
I was just down in Southern Oregon, and we drove by a couple of logging trucks, and every time just like hands tighten on the wheel a little bit more.
That's kind of the funny thing about these movies too, which is, it's not like I go camping very often, but I don't get too terribly nervous about a Jason Voorhees in the woods. Uh-huh. But when I drive past a logging vehicle, I get a little bit more nervous because that's realistic. And I bet that wreck has happened before, you know? Mm-hmm. The roller coaster death is fantastic. Like the bridge, all of them are good, except for the first one, which, as we've talked about, was a way different setup.
I mean, it's fine. Mm-hmm. Obviously, like it's a totally relatable thing. That idea of like, oh my God, this plane's going to go down. Yeah. Thinking about it, boy, the 1 in 4 just is not like, doesn't stick with me at all. You know, like I can barely remember stuff that happens.
You know why it doesn't? It just occurred to me. It's just because you're so much more of a spectator at that point. Yeah. You're literally watching a car crash, which I know is the point of the movie. Because remember, they really, is that what you call hanging a lantern on it? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because when you're driving down the highway and you see a logging truck, like you're more in it, I guess, instead of just watching an accident. Or obviously a roller coaster, you're in it.
Right. It's a little bit less relatable is the thing, where it's like, you can imagine being in a horrible car accident, or you've just been in a fender bend or something like that, and know that rush and whatever, or had some close calls. Mm-hmm. Or roller coasters are scary. We all know that's part of the thing of roller coasters, is like this feels like it's something could happen. Mm-hmm. But just being like, hey, what if she really went down at NASCAR? It's like, well, I don't really watch NASCAR, so I don't, that'd be bad, I guess.
Plus, everybody knows that you watch NASCAR for the wrecks, as they kept saying over and over. Right, so this isn't a surprise. Still, it was pretty well filmed, except for a lot of I guess that's where they started going pretty egregious CGI. 4 and 5. And I always want to be careful when I talk about this on the show, which is like, I'm not against CGI at all. And I don't want to be one of those middle-aged dudes who only talks about goopy 80s horror movies and their practical effects, because I think that visual effects done CGI have absolutely their place, but like there's something about that era that they haven't quite gotten to yet, and you just don't feel the impact like you do. Like it doesn't feel as physical.
Yeah, and some of it's interesting, like, and I think it's too soon to say with this, or at least, you know, for people of my generation, is that there's a certain amount of stop motion stuff that I remember, like, as a kid or teen or whatever, being like, oh, it looks so fakey, that now I really appreciate. Whereas I think that some of the CG stuff, it's harder to appreciate the dated look of it yet. There's certain things like the end of Spawn is just so ridiculous and terrible that I can go like, oh my God, that's so funny. But like, honestly, like some of the Lord of the Rings stuff I've seen, like revisiting some of the Lord of the Rings movies, was like, well, some of that's not that great now, or, you know, it doesn't hold up because it's the same kind of stuff, but shinier and better now. Yeah. And so it ages differently. And so I can't say that like this stuff's never going to, you know, sure, people aren't going to appreciate it in the same way that people appreciate like stop motion. But I do think there are certain things that kind of take me out of it more when it's dated and looks. I mean, a lot of stuff in 4 just didn't look that great. Yeah. We do not talk poorly about Lord of the Rings on this podcast, and sorry. It is buttressed by the emotion of Samwise Gamgee, and you know, no, I'm just. No, I hear what you're saying, because that was in the same era though, the early 2000s, when all that CGI was just like really untamed territory at that point. And I'm not saying it's bad. Exactly. It just doesn't age well. It's just dated. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Totally. But then again, there's stuff that's made like last year that, you know, a lot of the Marvel stuff where I'm like, I hate the way this looks. Oh, completely. And it's very well done, but I'm like, I still hate it. Right. I mean, this will be a debate till the end of the time, especially in horror stuff. But like what you mentioned about the stop motion and what you mentioned about the physical effects, like there's a charm to it that just I respond to much more than the charm of CGI stuff. And I wonder if we just ask somebody who's 15 years younger, like, hey, listeners who are younger than us, like, is there CGI that you consider kind of dated at this point but charming? That kind of thing is over my head. Like I don't respond to it at all. Because I think it's a little bit harder to see the craftsmanship in it. And I'm saying like more that's more of a fault of me than like the thing itself. Whereas like you see the stop motion stuff, you think, oh, someone spent a bunch of time to do that or whatever. And it's not like people spend so much time on the CG stuff, and like all these little tweaks and touches to make sure it looks a certain way. Mm-hmm. And this is coming from somebody who works in post-production professionally. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But there's some stuff where I'm just like, I don't know. It just doesn't hit me the same way, even though I know it takes like, I don't doubt the amount of time it took to make one of Michael Bay's Transformers. Absolutely. It's amazing work. I don't care. Yeah. You know, like congratulations, but like that doesn't make the movie any better. Right. Well, that's a different complaint than what we're talking about. But and I know this is a done argument, especially in horror at this point. But this is our first franchise that has made a leap in that, I guess, is why it stood out to me, because I feel like the first couple of films were, I'm sure they had CG in them, but like they were predominantly more physically effects. Practical effects. But these did make the jump in 4 and 5 to more CGI. Yeah. Well, because Jason or Friday the 13th, like the Jason X has some like digital blood, but mostly it's still right kind of stuff. And Phantasm, like it's funny because Phantasm went to more CG stuff and digital stuff as a cost cutting measure. Yeah, which is kind of wild to think about. But this is big professional stuff. I think kind of in the weeds on that one, but it's interesting to think about like how that stuff holds up, because I still think, I think of the effects in 3. That is to say that there was no CG involved in this, but like one thing that always sticks out is the engine hitting Frankie cheeks. Yeah, like that effect is great. Like however that was done was so great. If it was CG or not, combination more like that. That's great. Yeah. Yeah, that was a combination of like physical effects and CGI put together. So that's the perfect marriage. That's when I want CGI to augment and do something better. But just because I just like the woman getting crushed by the engine in 4 just looked bad. Yeah, it's not like you could make physical effects look bad too. But sure. But it is interesting that because you're watching that happen with this as this stuff becomes more prevalent. you're watching the franchise grow with that.
Right.
If that's the first time we've encountered something like this.
Exactly. Yeah. I want to be careful to not like have the same argument the entire time because I know where I'll fall every single time. But this is the first time that we've seen it like over the spread of the 5 movies. This one's a little harder, but do you have a favorite final girl or guy? We got to go part 3, right?
Yeah, I'd probably go with Mary Elizabeth because Mary Elizabeth Winstead like does such a great job.
Yeah.
Like making that character a human being.
I agree.
And this tells you how impressive the acting is, or just like the how fleshed out these characters are. It's Ali Larter, Devon Sawa, and Mary Elizabeth Winstead. Beyond Clear Rivers, I could not tell you their names. The only reason I know Clear Rivers is because what a stupid name that is. I'd have to look it up. I know it's Alex something, but it's almost like I should know what I'm talking about. We're doing a podcast, but because 4 and 5 in particular, like I did not really care about anyone involved, and even the boy toy in 3, I thought was pretty good.
Yeah, I'd agree. And you brought this up when we did the show, but she brought a certain level of like emotion to the like survivor's guilt that, you know, that can be really delicate in a movie like this because part of you doesn't care. And then part of you wants the, can't we do something bigger with these ideas? You know? And so like the perfect marriage is that. Like I don't feel like her performance took me out of the rollicking good time that the movie was, I guess. But she still brought a little bit more to it. So yeah, what a perfect balance. She's great.
With any of these things, it sort of becomes like, well, I like these characters. How are you going to kill them? Yeah. And I feel like that was something that 4 and 5 kind of lost, where it's just like, no, we're just going to figure out how to kill them. We don't need to worry about making them likable or whatever. Yeah. Because I did enjoy that with, you know, finding something, because even, you know, how stupid Sean William Scott character is in the first one. I felt bad when he died.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. On the heels of that, what's our favorite kill?
That's a tough call.
And you can have 3.
The kitchen kill in 2 is so stupid. Yeah. You know, that one's so great because it's just sort of like a microcosm of this whole I mean, they're all the tiny little Rube Goldberg machines, but that one was just like over the top.
That ends with the ladder.
Yeah. He slips on the stuff that he threw out at the beginning. That one was great. The racist death being as goofy as it was, like that tickled me. So I'd probably put that up there.
Sure.
And then maybe the kid after the eye doctor getting killed.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, not to pretend that 2 was the only good one, but there's just a lot of good stuff in 2.
Completely. I mean, gosh, I want to say that the elevator decapitation in part 2 was also my favorite. And it's just like, I don't want to disparage anybody with prosthetic limbs, of course. However, I thought it was so just funny that this guy in an apartment building was just walking around with literally a box of like 30 hook hands.
Yeah, just a basket of hook, like inexplicably. I think that's really what it is. I don't think it's not to do with that. It's just that inexplicably this guy is throwing out a lot of prosthetics and it's not really touched on what's going on there.
They don't touch on it at all.
And then they make him a creep smelling people.
Yeah, it was just like, to me, that summed up what I liked about the entire franchise of it just being ridiculous. And I really hate the kind of modern humor of like where you could just yell, "That's so random." I don't like that at all. But there was something kind of funny about a guy just like walking down this, you know, the hallway with a box of hook hands and who ended up hooking the poor lady's hair.
And I think that's a strength of this series, is that it does like this really ridiculous stuff. And you know that it's ridiculous because you see that guy and you're like, well, something's going to happen. Yeah. But they don't, as you said, hang a lantern on it. Yeah. They're not like, oh boy, here we go, everybody. They just let that happen. They let you do that work. Which I prefer.
And honorable mention to me is it doesn't count as an actual death because it's a part of the inciting incident. But the first log that gets dislodged in the accident that goes straight through that one car windshield and explodes the head out the back. Yeah. Oh, that's so good.
That one's really great.
That's up there. So basically what we're saying is part 2 is the best.
Part 2,
just watch that one.
I mean, there is also something to be said for the stupid scimitar Jim death of part 3.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just because, like, again, like how ridiculous that is with all the dudes yelling at the bear. And I really enjoyed that.
That one's so good because of the directing and the editing. And I don't want to take anything away from the prosthetics work on that, because it is, I mean, it's great, don't get me wrong, but it's just a head smash. But to me, that scene is so expertly done because the director and then the editor made that sequence build and build and build just through all those jocks screaming at each other. Then it finishes with the big like gore shot at the end. Hats off to those people.
And I think that's when the movie shine. And honestly, I think David R. Ellis, I think that's something that actually like he does very well. Even in 4 is that like funny, but still you're laughing, but you're still on edge a bit. Cause it's something's going to happen. And this is all ridiculous, but you're also focused on something's going to happen.
Right.
So the comedy becomes very uncanny and strange. And I like that.
Yeah.
Because it kind of plays into it. But it is very silly.
Well, especially when our protagonists walk into that scene looking around, and there's all those different cuts to what could go wrong.
Yeah.
So you as a viewer are thinking about what could go wrong, and then they expertly edited together all those shots of all those meatheads like going nuts, and then what's going to happen? Oh, something that you didn't see. It's got a little misdirect going on.
And I think that's something that goes into what I perhaps like less about 4 and 5 is that I do think that like building suspense is great and generally pretty well done. But like if I don't care about the characters, that's lost. The crux of this movie is that suspense. That's tough. So if you're making me watch that stupid massage guy forever, like I just want him dead. And I'm getting tired of you stretching it out.
What do we think about the lore in this series? And did the lore change over the 5 movies? I don't feel like it really did, but they tried to throw in like little tiny twists that never really bugged me, I don't think. Yeah,
because the only time that like the big one for me was in 5, where it's like, no, you can kill someone else and take their place.
Right. Yeah.
But then because that doesn't ever actually pay off, it's also, you just get all of it from Bloodworth, from Tony Todd. Right. So maybe he's figuring out like, oh shit, I thought that would have worked. Okay, I got to go back to the drawing board because that one guy, dies at the end after he thought he killed Roy. I do think they handle it pretty well, that it's kind of the same thing. I mean, obviously we talked about how they build off researching the first one over and over and over again. Because you can't build it around Tony Todd. Yeah. As much as I love Tony Todd, I want to see him in everything. Like you can't have different groups finding him for no good reason. Sure. And I thought the way they brought him back in 5 was actually pretty ingenious. Yeah, I think it's generally pretty consistent because it doesn't need to reinvent the wheel. These movies are still making, we're making money to a good enough degree. They're like, just to keep doing more of that. That's fine. Part of the reason why I wanted to like start talking about all these films in a franchise is how a lore will change. Like we went from Pamela Voorhees to Jason Voorhees to Jason being a Deadite. And like, I think that's like fun to look at. And with this, I think they just had their dumb idea pretty well set, and you get into the whole like going backwards thing a little bit. And by that time, like there were times when I would be watching it and I would just be like, you know what? I should be really paying attention to this, but I also just kind of want to be along for the ride too. Yeah. And it didn't bother me. So there was no egregious lore change. And I really like that they didn't bother to be like, in part 5, we're going to see the physical manifestation of death or something to that effect. Yeah. The most we got was the shimmer in 1 and then like the trees blowing. And I think you're absolutely right. And that's a strength to it. I think that's why you don't have to change the lore so much is because it's not a guy. You're like, well, how do we keep this same guy interesting? It's that you just have the concept of death and that weird things are going to happen. So you're free to just do whatever. Yeah. It doesn't have to be, well, how did he get the nail gun from there to there and then drop it, or you can just drop a nail gun. It's fine. Totally. One of our listeners, I think on Instagram, said something to the effect of like,
he likes to think of these movies being Death's first like week on the job and just being like, oh, I got to just catch up. Like I got to do all this like paperwork and like figure shit out just in case, you know, and that's kind of fun too. I wonder what Death's bureaucracy would be like, you know, behind the scenes.
It's like Beetlejuice, but worse.
Oh God, I love that.
Because but it's funny because like you think about like, you know, when you're starting a new job and you're like, oh, I'm gonna be the best at this and I'm gonna go above and beyond. And by week 3, you're like, this sucks. When's my break? And we're in like week 2 Death. Where it's like, oh boy, I gotta catch up now.
I gotta kill 8 kids in one fell swoop. So I guess at this point we have to come to who won on the kill count.
Oh yeah.
So I listened back today to our predictions. You were at 45. I was at 42 and then dropped to 40.
Okay.
I was just like, I want to be 40 just to like give a little bit more space. After listening back, there's like variables for like people who like die a second time, but in visions and all that kind of stuff. But as far as what I like did as the in memoriams, the final number is 40.
Oh, on the nose.
So I got right on the nose. Yes.
You know, like on one hand, that's very impressive, but on the other hand, I can't help but feel like you're cursed.
Yeah.
Like that's a bad coincidence that shouldn't happen.
Oh God, I didn't think. You know what? I was like having a very busy day at my day job today. And I was just like, I'm going to do all the kill counts for tonight's podcast. And I felt good about myself. And now I'm scared.
No, I took that away from you. I'm sorry.
You know what? Last night, a piece of art fell in our house and smashed to the ground at 5:30 in the morning. And it scared the bejesus out of me. If that happens again tonight, and if it's the piece of art hanging over my bed, I may think differently about this.
Going back to what you were saying about how like constantly I'm just like this knife is hanging over the edge of the kitchen counter a little bit. I'll just shove that in or like, oh, this could just coming up with different ways to murder yourself or things that like that was close. I wonder if that means that something bad's going to happen to me later.
Yep. This series of films has made me safer.
We talk about it being like one of those safety videos, like Shake Hands with Danger. It's just designed to make you go like, oh, you know what? I shouldn't shove a guy through a fence with an oxygen tank.
Right.
I'll make sure to close that valve.
So thinking about Final Destination in other formats, I guess there's been some comic books made. You had mentioned some other paperbacks that have been written.
Yeah.
Not just the novelizations, but there's a lot of Final Destination paperback thrillers, which is kind of great. And here's a few names: Final Destination Spring Break, Sacrifice, Death of the Senses, Looks Could Kill, Dead Man's Hand, End of the Line, Destination Zero, and Dead Reckoning. So that's a solid handful of like Final Destination fan fiction, basically.
Yeah. I mean, because you think about how infinitely repeatable these things are. You just kind of got to find a new angle on the disasters or whatever. But you're also, when you're writing, you're completely free of the logistical side of it.
Yeah. Oh, good
so you
point.
can have it do, you can make the inciting incidents as wild as you want, which has got to be pretty freeing.
That's got to be fun. Yeah. So knowing that, like, where would you see a part 6 going?
That's a good question. Because I mean, I was reading something about how this was back in 2021, so I don't know if this is still the same case, that some of the people that were going to take over part 6, and not to redo, wanted to do something with like an EMT or a first responder in some capacity.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Which is interesting enough, but I kind of feel like by making it just a Joe Everyman, I feel like that always works a bit better. Just because it's a more universal thing. And I also this isn't a Peter Berg, like, hooray for the troops and cops movies. It's, it's about young people and death.
Yeah.
So, I mean, go ahead and try something new, I guess. I also don't want you to. Like, we talked to you in the Jason one, and particularly talked about that strain of wanting to do something new versus keeping it the old.
Right.
There's still so much ground to cover on this. Like, you don't have to do too many tweaks. You don't have to reinvent the wheel that hard to add a little spice to it. I mean, bring back the, like, Life for a Life thing and do more with that. That could be interesting. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be the same teens about to graduate and this is going to happen. But I do think, just find a unique situation that is still somehow relatable. You know what I mean? Like a fashion model on a shoot. Well, I don't know. But like if you had a bunch of, lights falling over and stuff exploding, that could be neat to watch. But, you can't really just go back to the car crash thing because that just seems so like that they did that already in 2.
Yeah.
But I would still like to see something along the same line. I don't need a whole new reinvention. And also something that worries me going into, part 6 is that you don't have to pay reverence to what came before. 2, having the tie to 1 makes sense because it's death rippling outwards. And I like that as a concept, but I feel like that's kind of limited and you can't really go back to that now. There might be a way, but it seems a little bit less exciting. Yeah. Other than like researching this stuff and like seeing that other people had died, there's no like, we need to make a lot of references to the first one. It's like that. Like you'll see in a little montage at the end of like the way people died or something that's fun, but leave it there. Yeah. And I'd be worried that they would try to do something like that. Like, well, this is a legacy sequel, so we've got to, who cares? Yeah.
I just want them to do one more in the same series. Like, I don't want anything to be different. I want Tony Todd to show up. I want some disaster at the beginning and just keep going. Like, that's the beauty of this. You don't need to, like, more than any other franchise, like, you don't need to reinvent the wheel on this one.
You can't really get tired of the concept of death. Right. Like that's, we've had thousands of years of art about that at this point. So you don't have to worry about like reinventing, like, oh, we got to make sure that the relationship between our main character and this is, what if Michael Myers and Laurie Strode's relationship was this now? Doesn't matter. You don't have to deal with any of that. It's just, is death coming for you? And if you want to figure it out. And as we've kind of figured out in 5, like having the people be a little bit more involved in trying to figure it out. Yeah. I think is necessary.
That's a really good call. Yeah. Because that was my biggest complaint on part 5, whereas it just felt like set piece after set piece with no forward momentum by a character with any agency. So we need, even if it is just the same thing of just like scrambling from scene to scene, I need that.
I mean, and even if you go like, we talked about part 3 being QAnon. If you go down that road of like really leaning into that of like, here's an insane, like a clearly insane person that's saying this stuff, but then, oh my God, that actually ends up being real. Like that could be a fun twist on it as well.
Sure.
But yeah, as long as people are kind of more engaged and there's like a reason to be concerned about these different things that are happening other than just waiting for the body count to add up.
Yeah. So part 6 does have a creative team behind them, Lipovsky and Stein. Evidently, they had a hell of a Zoom pitch where they were pitching the producers of the series, and they created an entire series of accidents behind them on the Zoom meeting as they were pitching part 6 to them, where like the ceiling fan fell and broke, and they like really incorporated some sort of like special effects and stuff like that. And usually that kind of thing is a little bit frowned upon. Like you just do your pitch, but evidently like that kind of thing endeared them to the producers so much that I think they've got the job to make part 6. I'll take it for this dumb movie, like go for it, guys. That sounds great.
I mean, yeah, and that would actually be an interesting twist on it now that I'm thinking about it. Did you ever watch that movie Host?
I did. I really liked it.
The Zoom horror call? Yeah, like do a Zoom call that's the Final Destination found footage movie that's just a Zoom call. It's just the different people on the call like dying horribly.
Certainly.
Like, that would be, I don't know how you could do it where like, no, I'll totally stay on the call now that I just watched Larry get cut in half.
Right. Yeah.
But it's just something like that would be pretty fun.
Yeah. Found footage, Final Destination. I mean, gosh. But yeah, evidently something is in development right now for part 6. And I guess we'll be there to see it, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'd 100% go check it out. I like I said, like we didn't like 5, but it's not like, oh God, this thing's dead to me now. It was just like, no, this one didn't work. Right. I don't know if you know this. Life is like a box of chocolate. And in this case, we got one that was like, I don't know, orange liqueur flavored.
Yeah, not so good.
But the next one will be good.
No, yeah.
I think that's the second Life is like a box of chocolates reference I've made on this podcast.
Man,
that's depressing.
You're really good at bringing back 30-year-old references.
I am. Yeah. That's what I do. I stopped caring after 1996, and I just went, I know everything I need to know.
Yep.
Good.
That's why we watch 80s horror movies mainly. Okay, well, I think that's about all I got to say about the Final Destination franchise.
Yeah,
Super
I mean,
fun.
there's part of me that wishes there was a little bit more like meat on the bone in terms of like stuff to really dive into with this. But at the same time, I can't get mad at it for being what it is and doing what it does pretty well.
It is what it is.
It's pretty simple. It's fun. That's fine.
Yeah.
There's definitely space for those kind of things, and I'm not upset. And honestly, like the fact that there hasn't been nonstop Final Destination stuff kind of makes me happy. Kind of makes me appreciate it even more. That it's like, well, they haven't wrung it into the ground yet. That the last one came out, 10 years ago, and now they're like, well, maybe we'll do another one.
Yeah,
that could be cool.
Great. Yeah, I'll be there, and we'll do an emergency pod for that. We'll our first thoughts.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, hot takes because people need to know immediately.
Right. So next week, since we are in the thick of October, I'm sure that everybody listening to this is watching a ton of horror films. Probably not all in the franchise dome. I know John is up to number 18 that you've watched so far?
I have crossed the Rubicon of 20 at this point.
Okay, cool.
I had a little bit of time off because as I mentioned, I left town for a bit. But
so we thought that we might take a little bit of a break from our normal stuff, also because I'm traveling for work for 2 weeks and, mucked up our schedule a little bit. But why not give the people a few recommendations of stuff that they can watch while there's a little bit more October left? And maybe we'll discuss some more recent horror films or just like recent films that we've watched, whether they're from 2022 or not, basically.
Yeah, recent, new to us.
I suppose. Yeah, exactly. So that does it for our third franchise, Final Destination. We're going to figure out what we're going to do in the interim, but right around Thanksgiving and definitely through the Christmas season, we're going to be doing Silent Night, Deadly Night. So y'all should track that down and watch them. I've only seen the first two, I think, and then they go a little off the rails from what I can understand, but I'm all for that.
The first two, well, the second one gets took a lot of guff online for being bad, because it is. But there's also like, when you see the names behind it, it makes a little bit more sense. But I have seen 4 of them.
Oh, okay.
But I don't remember. I actually just revisited 4 not that long ago for reasons I could not possibly articulate. But there's going to be some scheduling stuff we got to figure out because there's work travels happening in the next couple of weeks.
Yep.
But we'll come back with something before we hit that.
Absolutely.
It might just be like a quick look at a trilogy or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, just be, I know I am definitely one of those people where we don't talk about Christmas until after Halloween at least, and if not Thanksgiving. But I do love Christmas, so we will just jump into Silent Night, Deadly Night right around the Christmas season.
Oh yeah, there's no excuse for Nog being available now. It's upsetting.
I agree.
I'm so mad about that.
All right, everyone. Well, thanks for joining us through these 5 films for Final Destination, and you can check us out on Twitter at Heardabit and on Instagram at thismayheardabitpod, and a similar email address, thismayheardabitpod@gmail.com.
Oh, and I'd like to give a shout out to at Major from Bejor for saying some nice things about us on Twitter. Appreciate that. I'm glad you've been enjoying the show.
Yeah. Major from Bejor. What would that be? Kira Nerys?
That would be Kira Nerys. I mean, I don't think this person is Kira. I'm hoping it's Kira Nerys, but I don't think it's actually Kira Nerys.
If Kira was listening to the podcast, I'd be pretty into that.
Yeah. It'd be pretty sweet.
And we will see you next week.
Thanks for joining us.
This has been a Two Penguins media production. It was produced by James Strayer and edited by John C. Myers. Logo by Ethan Kimberling and music by Michael Arthur Holloway, who you can find on Bandcamp. Follow us on Instagram at thismayheardabitpod and on Twitter at hurtabit. Email us at thismayheardabit@gmail.com. And if you are so inclined, rate and review us on your favorite podcast app, and we'll see you next time.